It is the John Phillips Show. Johnny is stuck on jury duty. Hopefully for just today. We'll find out around 5 o'clock if he has to do it tomorrow. So it's Randy Wang here. The phone number to join us is 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. You can email us at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And everyone listening, you should subscribe to our podcast just so we can brag about how big our numbers are by searching for the John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts. In Sacramento, there's a word that loves to be uttered, and that word is equity. What does it actually mean? Nobody knows. But equity is the cause behind so many ideas in Sacramento that make very little sense, including the latest attempt to screw over anybody that over the last 20 or 30 years took the state of California up on the proposal of helping save the planet by getting rooftop solar panels. There was a protest in Sacramento this week over this new legislation that would screw over people that bought rooftop solar panels based on the incentives that they said that they were going to be getting for the next 20 years. That was in a contract with the state of California that now California, because they love to do the bidding of PG&E and SoCal Edison, is trying to wiggle their way out of. What's going on here? How is the state of California screwing over rooftop solar owners? And what the hell does it have to do with equity? Well, let's find out. Here's a report from KPIX in the Bay Area.
At the state capitol today, furious Bay Area residents are fighting back against a plan to change the rules for homeowners with solar power. Don Ramos spoke to them about why they feel so betrayed.
The California legislature created the demand for rooftop solar 30 years ago, so they probably shouldn't be surprised that there's opposition now that they're talking about taking some of it away.
You know, when people sign a contract, especially for something that might take them 20, 30 years to pay for, you want to make sure that you're getting what you were promised. And no, we are screwing over anyone that bought into this because environmentalism doesn't matter anymore. It's all about equity.
The sun is the source of heat for the planet, and that's especially true in Sacramento these days.
No! AB 94.
Get what he did there? Because heat, people are angry. Oh, how clever.
No! AB 942. No! AB 942.
The solar industry and system owners have not been shy about expressing their views about Assembly Bill 942.
And of course, this is only the latest attack against solar. They already passed legislation and rules through the California Public Utilities Commission, which is a shell of a regulatory agency because it's made up of appointees that Gavin Newsom picked that happen to be former executives of SoCal Edison and PG&E. But they made it so any new adopters of rooftop solar don't get the incentives that make it so attractive because the system will pay for itself. And you're actually helping out the grid because you're selling your excess electricity back to the utilities. Well, they don't like that.
The bill is authored by Southern California Assembly member Lisa Calderon.
Okay, we got to stop electing Calderon's people. And this is also, I find this so unbelievably unethical, and I don't know how this is even allowed, but it's Sacramento, so of course it's allowed. Lisa Calderon is not only part of the never-ending Calderon dynasty, she also, before running for assembly, worked as the government affairs director for Edison International from 1996 to 2020. How exactly is it ethical for someone who worked in the utility industry for a very long time to write legislation that specifically benefits her benefactor? Gee, I wonder how much money she got from SoCal Edison and PG&E to run for this office.
The bill is authored by Southern California Assembly member Lisa Calderon, who says the 20-year solar incentives created by the legislature no longer work.
Well, they were working until we kneecapped them for all the new people, and the solar business fell off a cliff in the state of California. There's still a lot of people that already have it, but a lot of the new people lost the incentive to do it. So unless your heart is really into it, if you're going to lose money on this and you're not going to be able to transport your system or get out of a lease, it's just you're making a very difficult proposition when I thought the whole goal was we want to get everyone on clean energy.
Today, however, subsidies are no longer fair or equitable and have led to a cost shift onto non-solar customers to ensure the grid is maintained.
See, this is the latest ploy from people like Patty Poppy at PG&E and the people at SoCal Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric. We're not forgetting them as well. It's that you got to understand, because of all of these people getting these benefits from rooftop solar, we've had to shift our costs onto the poor people that can't afford solar. So it's not equitable for us to be giving incentives, because typically the people that can afford solar are doing fairly well in life. And that's not equitable. What's equitable is whether you have solar or not, you should have an electric bill from PG&E or SoCal Edison that makes you want to rip your hair out. That's equity in Sacramento, or at least when legislation is being written by a straight-up lobbyist for the utility industry.
Today, however, subsidies are no longer fair or equitable and have led to a cost shift onto non-solar customers to ensure the grid is maintained. This cost shift amounted to an estimated $8.5 billion last year alone and is expected to increase in future years.
Who gave you those numbers? PG&E, the same company that's gotten record profits after 6 rate increases all in 1 year, and then asked for another rate increase this year just to increase their profits and dividends to investors?
The argument is that early adopters of solar are getting such a high price for the excess energy they produce that they avoid paying for the cost of the grid and PG&E's operation.
Well, it's cheaper for PG&E and SoCal Edison to buy that excess energy from solar and put it back into the grid than to produce the energy from other means. So what exactly is the argument here outside of PG&E sees a whole lot of customers that are able to not have to use their product, and they don't like that?
Including the billions of dollars being spent to mitigate wildfires. That leaves those who...
Oh, stop it with the wildfires. PG&E had a certain amount of money that they were supposed to be spending on wildfire mitigation and fixing up their equipment. And you know what they used a lot of that money for? That was directly from ratepayer hikes to fix their infrastructure. They bought ad time on local stations in Sacramento, putting out ads saying how great PG&E is at keeping people safe.
Including the billions of dollars being spent to mitigate wildfires. That leaves those who don't have solar to pay those costs. And Calderon says it's not a small amount.
In total, the cost shift onto non-solar customers is roughly 25% of a non-solar customer's energy bill.
Now, let's not forget the other thing they did in the name of equity in just recent years. They decided, well, we're going to start charging people a flat fee to use the grid based on your income, not your usage, because that's equity.
Well, they're lying. There's a dozen economists that have completely debunked that claim that somehow solar customers are to blame for high rates.
Dave Rosenfeld heads up the Solar Rights Alliance. They say what's being ignored is all the energy that rooftop solar is providing that the big utilities do not have to pay to create.
Yeah, what they're paying the rooftop solar owners, even with the generous incentives that were in these 20-year contracts, is nothing compared to what they have to pay for to generate all the other power.
And they're mad as hell that the state is considering breaking a contract with solar owners.
And that's the other thing. How can you ever trust this state again if you were told, if you spend your hard-earned money to buy this system, for 20 years, we're going to make sure that you make it worth your while. And then 10 years in, we say, no, screw you. And I thought this state's whole goal was climate change, environmentalism, and clean air. And no, it's equity. Or it's equity disguised as a big old payday for PG&E and SoCal Edison.
It refers to the 20-year terms as a guarantee. That's the CPUC's own words. So in every way, for all of this time, the state has been representing this as a contract, as a legal agreement, something that is very, very serious. And people made long-term financial decisions believing the state at its word that it was a guarantee, that it was a contract.
Well, the state of California is definitely going to get sued if this thing passes.
AB 942 initially proposed to cut the 20-year term to 10 years, but the outcry was such that that was removed. Now the argument is over what happens if someone with a favorable contract sells their home. The current rules say the new owner inherits the previous solar agreement.
That would make sense. It's the same solar panels. It's saving the planet for that house.
Under 942, they would get a much lower rate for their energy. Kathy Schiffer considers that a betrayal.
And I do want to sell my house in the future, and so this was going to be an addition to my house. It would make it more attractive, and now it won't be that.
That's one of the things. A lot of people bought solar because they knew when they sold their home, they could sell it for an increased price, because you buy this house, it's already got the solar panels installed. And for the next 15, 20 years, you're going to be making money off of it. You're going to have smaller bills on your electricity because you're generating so much solar.
To me, the whole thing has just kind of fallen apart. The reason to get solar, the financial reason to get solar.
Even under the new proposed rules, a solar power system would still be a better deal than no solar at all. The question is how long it would take for the system to pay for itself, and how attractive it may be to buyers when it comes time to sell the home.
Yeah, if it makes it more difficult for you to sell your home, well, that's something that's going to, once again, come into consideration here.
The solar advocates originally planned to protest next week, but they moved it to today. They say the legislation is being fast-tracked and could have been put up for a vote as soon as today.
Look, we've got a lot of people listening to us in Southern California and the Bay Area. You might be an owner of rooftop solar. You might have got in when these deals were so good. But you understand the plight that Lisa Calderon has pointed out, that it's just not equitable. And PG&E and SoCal Edison are passing on the cost that they could be charging you to the poor, to the people that can't afford it, because they can't afford solar. So I'd love to hear from you right now at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. If you were an early adopter of rooftop solar in the state of California, would you be willing to pay more in your electric bill in the name of equity? 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Sure, it was a great deal for you, and sure, you're helping save the planet, but what you don't understand is it's not fair to the people that can't afford solar. So are you willing to pay more in your electric bill and not get the incentives that you get in the name of equity? Give me a call right now. 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Whether you're in SoCal, the Bay, up and down the state of California, give us a call right now, 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5. It's the John Phillips Show. Johnny's stuck on jury duty today. Hopefully he's back tomorrow. It's Randy Wang here. We're taking your phone calls at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. There's a new bill in the California Assembly going around that is going after owners of rooftop solar. They believe that the incentives are too generous and it's not equitable because it shifts the cost of maintaining the grid onto the poor people that can't afford solar. What I'd love to hear from you at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222 is this: if you happen to be an owner of rooftop solar, are you willing to pay more in your electric bill for the sake of equity? 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222. Lots of emails coming in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. CP writes in, Randy and John, electrical energy has to be created but also transmitted from the power plant to the homes and offices via the grid. Local production of energy on a rooftop relieves the grid upgrade needs because power is produced where it's needed, right at your home. No excuse they are shifting costs on a non-solar people, except the excess costs that they are generating and the pressure on utilities to pay for stuff they didn't necessarily do, like create Gavin's wildfires. Leftists in Sacramento act like they can wave a wand and dictate people's return on a hard contracted investment and plans to sell an upgraded solar home. That's basically exploitation. In talking under the Fifth Amendment, it's taking without compensation. Well, here we go. Vince writes in and says, hey, Randy, I believe a new house in California by law requires solar panels. Isn't that interesting? One of the other things that making it so expensive to build here is regulations like that, and now there's not even any incentives for the owners of that solar if this goes through. And you got to remember, they already got rid of the incentives for new adopters. They did that a couple of years ago, and the solar industry has fallen off a cliff in the state of California. You know where all the solar is being built? You know where all the adoption for that's going? Texas. You know what state's producing more clean energy than California? Texas. Chuck writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Hey, Randy, I wonder why PG&E, the DWP, and Edison never trim their own fat instead of begging for rate increases. Can't tell you how many times I've seen brand new $120,000 DWP trucks sitting under trees with the motor running and the air conditioning blasting while they sleep. I see it every day, and it's nothing short of criminal. How about some layoffs to help balance their books? Well, we don't do that. That's not how this works. And the DWP is one thing because that's municipally owned and that's our own problem. And for some reason, Karen Bass thought it'd be a great idea to hire a PG&E executive, Janice Quinones, to run the DWP. And the former head of the DWP made $375,000 a year. Janice Quinones makes $750,000 a year, and she has no explanation for why there was no water in the reservoir during the Palisades fires. So how does that make any sense? I wonder how much my bill has gone up since Janice Quinones took over for the LADWP. And by the way, Karen Bass, this is very true. She was at that panel at the Milken Institute with Rick Caruso and Alex Michelson, and she was asked about Janice Quinones and her salary. And she said, you got to understand, she took a pay cut to come work here. Because I guess she was making more than $750K working at PG&E. I'm shocked. It's such a racket going on here, but this is what it is. Hey, how about this, everyone? Something nice. 790 KABC welcomes Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin evening at the Greek Theater on May 31st. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. But right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Nederlander Concerts. Good luck dialing. When we come back, equity is staying on topic because there's a new move for equity in San Francisco that might be one of the craziest things you've ever heard. This is The John Phillips Show. It's The John Phillips Show. Johnny is on jury duty. Hopefully he's back tomorrow. It's Randy Wang here. This is usually where I'd say the phone number to join us is, but the phones are down. So if you'd like to communicate with this show today, you can email us at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Nicholas writes in and says, I've never heard of someone having jury duty as often as John Phillips. I'm starting to think that it's just something he says when he's too hungover to work. Well, let me tell you two things. One, Nicholas, Johnny was hungover and he worked yesterday. He did great. We were all hungover. Monday was Memorial Day. But here's the deal. If you live in a place like Los Angeles County, it's so unbelievably massive that maybe you get a jury duty summons, maybe it gets lost in the mail, who knows? They're not really able to track because, of course not, this county has 10 million people in it. John lives in Riverside County, and the thing with jury duty is if you're over 70, you don't have to serve. So if you happen to live in Riverside County and you're under the age of 70, which John is way under the age of 70, the age of 45, he gets a lot of jury duty summons. Hopefully he doesn't get picked for a trial like he did last year because that was fairly traumatizing to him. But I'm texting with him back and forth. Hopefully he does not get picked and he can be here to do this show. Another email came in from Tom at Randy. This is my other email address for the other show I do. But Tom writes in and says, you want to talk about equity? Grading for equity is coming to San Francisco high schools this fall. You got to find a video news report on this. Now, typically how I like to work is when I see a story, I try to find the best video report out there. Usually it's from one of our great local stations. Either it's in Southern California with Fox 11 or ABC 7, or it's in the Bay Area with ABC 7, KTVU, Fox 2, KPIX. And then I can help explain to you what the madness is through that story. This is a story that comes from our friends over at The Voice of San Francisco, and it needs to be told right now, even without a video report. So I'm going to read you a little bit of what's going on here, but if you don't know The Voice of San Francisco, it is great independent journalism coming out of the Bay Area. But yes, grading for equity is coming to San Francisco high schools this fall. District materials highlight a decrease in A grades for more privileged students. Without seeking approval of the San Francisco Board of Education, the superintendent of schools, Maria Sue, plans to unveil a new grading for equity plan on Tuesday that will go into effect this fall for 14 high schools and cover 10,000 students. The school district is already negotiating with an outside consultant to train teachers in August in a system that awards a passing C grade to a score as low as 41 on a 100-point exam. Isn't a 41 an F minus? How is this not just lowering the standards? And the standards are already severely low here in California, but I guess this is what you do when the state of California, that spends as much money on education as we do, ranks below Mississippi when it comes to reading and writing and math. It ranks below Mississippi to the point where most California school kids, they pronounce it Miss Pippi. Were it not for an intrepid school board member, this drastic change in grading with implications for college admissions and career readiness would have gone unnoticed and unexplained. It's buried in a 3-word phrase on the last page of a PowerPoint presentation embedded in the school board meeting's 25-page agenda. I wonder if the San Francisco School Board has somebody that gets paid just to do what we pay at the LA County Department of Public Health.
Next slide.
Someone gets paid to click on PowerPoint. That's a job. The plan comes during the last week of the spring semester while parents are assessing the impact of over $100 million in budget reductions and deciding whether to remain in the public schools this fall. While the school district acknowledges that parent aversion to this grading approach is typically high and understands the need for vigilant communication, outreach to parents has been minimal and maybe non-existent. The school district's Office of Equity homepage does not mention it. Wait a second. SFUSD is facing a $100 million budget shortfall, and they kept the Office of Equity? What does that mean? What does it do? A page containing the SFUSD's definition of equity has not been updated in almost 3 years. So what is grading for equity, you ask? Well, grading for equity eliminates homework or weekly tests from being counted in a student's final semester grade. So if it's not counted in the grade, that means you don't do it. Look, kids are dumb, but kids are also really smart. I'll tell you from my own history, and this was probably one of the dumber things that I ever did, but I really thought I was smart. Grading for equity eliminates homework and weekly tests from being counted in a student's final semester grade, which means there is no longer any reason to do homework in grading for equity. That is not equitable. You don't need to worry about turning anything in. You can be late turning in an assignment. You don't even need to show up to class as long as you take that final exam. This is like when I was in, I wouldn't necessarily call it college because it was a god-awful for-profit trade school. My life was a mess before I figured out radio was my calling. And I was taking an online class, and I figured out that I could just click on all of the assignments and do them and knock out this 3-month course in about a day. Turns out they didn't like that. Currently, when it comes to grading, a student needs a 90 for an A or at least a 61 for a D. Under the San Leandro Unified School District's grading for equity system, which is being touted by the consultant who is pitching this to San Francisco Unified, a student with a score as low as 80 can attend an A. Oh, wow. I would have gotten straight A's instead of straight B's in my final year of high school, where I just realized I'm not going to pay attention to what the professor is saying at all, and I'm just going to do all the homework in class so I can goof off and play video games. I ended up in radio. What do you expect? And you can pass with a D with a score as low as a 21. You can get a 21 on a final exam and you'd still pass the class. You don't have to turn in any homework. You don't even have to show up to school as long as you show up on that one last day and you take the test. As long as you get 1 out of 5 questions right, you've passed the class. What exactly is this equitable for? Because not only is this lowering the standards, this is incentivizing children not to learn, not to pay attention, because there's no need to. Who exactly does this help? Let's go back to the piece here. This is from The Voice of San Francisco, thevoicesf.org. Grading for equity coming to San Francisco high schools this fall. Joe Feldman, the consultant the school district plans to contract with no implement, Grading for Equity wrote in 2019 in Placer County, another jurisdiction with this grading system, students who did not qualify for free or reduced price lunch had a sharper decrease in A's, reflecting how traditional grading practices disproportionately benefit students with resources because of the inequitable inclusion of the extra credit and other resource-dependent grading criteria. What? I'm so confused about all of this. Grading for equity may reduce A and DF grades. Everyone's just going to get a C, according to Feldman, and enable a school district to cut costs for remedial classes. But what about student academic outcomes? The most recent data for both middle schools in San Leandro, where this grading reform started in 2016, document significant continued disparities among student population when it comes to performance on statewide assessment tests. So even lowering the standards, still nobody's passing. This is, I would say it's unbelievable, but it's the state of California. Are we really surprised? If you'd like to email us, you could do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Will writes in and says, whoever bought this free BS from California lib hacks and oh so trustworthy power company CEOs that solar will be free forever must be fans of the kick me sign-up signs and sticking their fingers in light sockets. Lesson 101 libs, what's too good to be true is voting D up and down the line makes as much sense as Gavin Newsom. None. Referring to, of course, the other equity story this hour, the solar incentives going away in the name of equity. Brian, listening online in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Randy, under No Child Left Behind, schools are not allowed to hold back students who can't read. They must be promoted to the next grade. Can we all admit that that program's been a complete failure? Paul writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Confirm, Randy, I'm 61. I live in Riverside County, and I get jury duty requests twice a year. Like Johnny, the last one consumed 3 weeks of my life. If it wasn't for my PTO for my company, I would have been disgruntled. Alan writes in on solar equity for the rich, too. My friends and soon-to-be south-facing solar Napa County roof provider provides power to me through PG&E lines to each of my neighbors through the big trees and messy roofs that cannot implement solar panels. Our extra solar production doesn't get to the people in the equity target areas. Furthermore, our production comes from MCE, Marin County Energy, at 12 cents per kilowatt. If you're on an EV2 rate, but PG&E tags on another 31 cents just for transmission costs, so nobody is getting any equity, least of all we with solar panels. Al in Napa is grumpy again today. And look at this. The phones are back, so let's go to them. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. Let's go first to a jury duty story. John in San Luis Obispo. John, hello. John.
Hey, Randy. Gotta laugh at John. Sorry about that. Your daddy's got the duty. It's a thankless job, but someone's got to do it.
Well, and I think the hardest part for him last time when he got picked for the trial was the only restaurant near the courthouse that he could eat at was Applebee's. And can you imagine eating Applebee's every day for 3 weeks? Thanks so much for the call, John. Appreciate it. All right, we got some calls on solar panels and all this nonsense. Let's go to Dale in Long Beach. Dale, hello.
Yeah, Randy, I spent $7,200 on solar panels with my own money. I didn't get no rebates or nothing. And no, I don't want to pay more for my electricity.
Not even in the name of equity, Dale?
No, nobody helped me pay for mine. I had to work hard for that money. Not even my wife helped me pay for them.
Well, this is what happens. We have so many special interests, including PG&E and SoCal Edison, who now you go from an executive at one of those companies to literally being in the assembly because for some reason we keep voting for people named Calderon, and this is what we get. We're going to jack up everyone's rates. And by the way, this isn't going to lower the bills of the people that don't have solar panels. That's not what this is going to do. There's nowhere even saying it's going to lower people's bills. It's only going to increase people's bills that have solar.
Even the poor people are going to have to pay more. And they got so many proposals about these solar panels, I can't keep up with the legislation.
Well, that's Sacramento. If they pass 1,000 bills a year, there's no way we can pay attention to all of them. And that's the insanity that this state has been dealing with for a very long time.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number. Let's go to Don in Napa. Don, hello.
Yes. I was commenting on the solar panel issue. 2015, I spent $30,000 on 27 panels. I just found out last year that the company that gave me the 25-year warranty went out of business. So this year I've got to pay another $12,000 to replace the inverters so I can get power back again. And PG&E, I don't know how many people are aware, we've got to be spending billions on batteries all located in central locations. And they can't distribute a good part of the time. I live in kind of a north section of Napa on the south side of the highway. We lose power regularly. They say, anytime a branch touches a line, you're down. Then they got to send somebody out to check all the area before they can turn it back on. If you have a battery at your place, you're not down. And so it's insanity to locate them. We already saw the fire that they had at a battery storage plant that contaminated, I forgot how many miles, with heavy metals, serious contamination, and it's insanity to put all those batteries at one location.
Oh, we know. You look at why the devastation was so awful in the Pacific Palisades with the fires in Southern California this year. And part of it was how many solar panel batteries there were, how many Tesla battery walls there were, and how many electric vehicles there were. And that's why the materials are so toxic in cleaning that debris when we're just, there these things that are supposed to be clean and green. If they catch on fire, they're more toxic than anything else in the world.
Well, and they're trying to convert us to all electric, shutting down, two refineries in California. And we were ground zero where I live for the 14 Napa earthquake, and you didn't have power for 3 to 4 days. And it's insanity. I talked to people at Tesla. I said, well, how far did you make it from Santa Rosa? Well, we made it halfway before people pushed me off the road.
Oh, my. Well, Don, thanks so much for calling in. We'll keep covering this insanity that's going out there. Thank you all so much for the calls. We made it through hour one. When we come back, Susan Shelley of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association and columnist for the Southern California News Group will join us. So stick it right here. It is The John Phillips Show.